They say the truth will set you free, but what they don't tell you is how much it'll hurt before you get there. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here staring at the broken shards of my marriage, I wouldn't have believed you. My wife, Natalie, had always been my rock. We were that couple, the kind of couple other people envied, or at least I thought so. I loved her with everything I had, but it turns out I was just a blind man willingly being led to the edge of a cliff. It all started innocuously enough. I wasn't suspicious by nature, but there were signs, small, seemingly unimportant details that began to add up until I could no longer ignore them. A lingering text message from a number that had no name but was suspiciously marked as work, her sudden habit of locking her phone, and her new disinterest in our usual Saturday morning rituals, pancakes, coffee, and cuddling on the couch. Natalie, the woman who used to share every moment of her life with me, suddenly seemed miles away. But the real beginning of the end came that day in early December. It was cold outside, the kind of bitter cold that sinks into your bones. I had just come home from work a bit earlier than usual. Natalie was supposed to be at a yoga class, something she'd recently taken up. I had planned on surprising her by making dinner. Instead, I was the one who got surprised. I heard her voice in the kitchen as soon as I entered the house, light, soft laughter that used to be reserved just for me. I walked in, expecting to find her alone, maybe talking on the phone. What I found instead was Natalie leaning against the counter, her eyes lit up in that way they hadn't been for me in months. And sitting at our kitchen table was the last person I ever expected to see. His name was Mark, her ex. I knew about Mark. Of course, I did. He was the guy she'd been with before we met, the guy who broke her heart and supposedly made her realize what a real relationship should be like. She told me she'd moved on. She told me I was the love of her life, and she never looked back. But there he was, sitting comfortably at our table, his smile stretching far too wide when he noticed my presence. "Hey, babe," Natalie said, her voice dripping with forced casualness. She barely glanced at me before focusing her attention back on Mark. Something inside me snapped then. There were no accusations, no yelling. I remember muttering something along the lines of, "I didn't realize you had company," before turning around and heading back outside. I felt like an intruder in my own home, like I was the one trespassing on something sacred. The air outside hit me like a punch, but it was nothing compared to the cold I felt spreading in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for a cigarette, something I hadn't touched since my 20s. That was the moment I knew. Maybe I had suspected it long before. Maybe I had been ignoring it because it hurt too much to acknowledge, but seeing them together, the ease in their interactions, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me, made everything crystal clear. Natalie was cheating on me with her ex. I didn't go back inside that night. Instead, I drove, without any destination in mind, just trying to escape the suffocating pain. I ended up in an old diner, the kind that always stays open regardless of the hour. I stared at my reflection in the window, the neon lights casting strange shadows across my face, and I knew that I couldn't let this slide, not just because she'd betrayed me, but because I needed her to understand exactly what she'd thrown away. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the oblivious husband to perfection. I smiled, I cooked, I kissed her goodnight, all the while gathering every piece of evidence I could find. The first clue came when she forgot to delete a message on her phone, something about missing last night. I made sure to snap a photo of it with my own phone while she showered. Then came the receipts, dinners, and hotels in parts of town she had no reason to be in, and her car's GPS, a recent destination marked as favorite that led to an address that was most definitely not yoga class. The entire time, I felt like I was outside of my own body, watching someone else's life crumble. I kept up appearances, but inside, I was numb, slowly being eaten away by a mixture of rage, pain, and an almost desperate need for retribution. Natalie's family had always liked me. They were the kind of people who put a lot of stock in appearances, the kind who valued loyalty and honesty. So, I knew if I wanted to hit Natalie where it hurt, I needed to make her lose face in front of them. It was a cruel idea, one that I almost backed out of more times than I could count. But every time I wavered, I'd see her smile as she texted him or hear her laugh when she thought I couldn't hear, And I'd remember that this was a woman who had destroyed our marriage while pretending everything was fine. The opportunity presented itself in the form of her parents' anniversary dinner. It was a big deal, one of those occasions where everyone in the family gathered to celebrate. I could see how much it meant to Natalie. She was so eager, so focused on making everything perfect, and I'll admit that part of me almost felt bad for what I was about to do. Almost. The night of the dinner, I dressed in my best suit and made sure everything looked perfect. Natalie, radiant in her blue dress, gave me a smile as we walked in together. She probably thought everything was fine. Maybe she even thought I was too blind or too trusting to ever catch on. I waited until everyone had gathered in the dining room, glasses raised in a toast to her parents. The air was filled with laughter, warmth, the glow of candles casting soft shadows across smiling faces. I stood up, glass in hand, and cleared my throat. "I'd like to make a toast," I said. All eyes turned to me, Natalie's included. She smiled, her eyes soft, trusting. I met her gaze and smiled back, a smile that never reached my eyes. "I want to toast to honesty," I began, my voice steady. "To loyalty and to love. To the kind of love that doesn't waver, that doesn't betray. To the kind of love that I thought I had with Natalie." I heard the murmurs, saw the confused glances. Natalie's smile faltered, her eyes widening just a fraction. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking just a little, and opened the folder I'd prepared. "But apparently," I continued, my voice thick with emotion, "I was wrong." I turned the phone toward her family, the pictures, the messages, the damning evidence all there for them to see. Gasps echoed around the room, followed by a stunned silence. Natalie's face went pale, her eyes wide and filled with something that almost looked like fear. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, not here." "Why not here, Natalie?" I snapped, my composure slipping. "Why not in front of the people who thought you were loyal, who thought you loved me? Why not show them the truth?" Her mother was crying, her father's face a mask of shock and disappointment. Natalie tried to reach for me, her eyes filled with tears, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't get to touch me. Not anymore." I looked around the room at the people who had become my family, at the shattered expressions on their faces. And then finally, I looked at Natalie, the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I'm done pretending. I'm done being the fool." With that, I set my glass down, turned, and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I heard her sob, heard the chaos that erupted behind me, but it didn't matter anymore. I was free, free from the lies, from the deceit, from the woman who had shattered my heart. I wish I could say that walking away was easy, that I felt instant relief, but that would be a lie. The truth is, it hurt like hell. I spent weeks feeling like I was hollow, like there was a piece of me missing. But eventually, the pain started to fade. I found solace in small things, in the quiet moments, in the freedom of knowing I no longer had to pretend. One day, I found myself back at that old diner, the same place I'd gone that first night after discovering the truth. The waitress smiled at me, her eyes kind, and asked if I'd like my usual. I realized then that I'd become a regular, that somehow, amidst all the chaos, I'd built a new routine, a new life, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. A real smile. Natalie tried to reach out to me a few times after that night, but I never responded. There was nothing left to say. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it away for a fleeting moment with someone who had already hurt her once before. Maybe she regretted it, maybe she didn't. But that wasn't my concern anymore. The truth had set me free, but it had also burned everything to the ground in the process. And as painful as it was, I knew it was for the best. Because now, I had the chance to rebuild, to find someone who would love me the way I deserved, someone who wouldn't betray me. And that hope, that possibility, was enough to keep me moving forward. It's been a year since that night at the anniversary dinner, since the night I walked out of Natalie's life for good. Life since then has been a journey, one I never anticipated taking, but in a strange way, it has been exactly what I needed. I used to wonder if I'd ever feel whole again, if there would ever be a day where her betrayal wouldn't cast a shadow over everything I did. I won't lie, it took time, and it took a lot of work. But eventually, I found something I never thought I would: peace. I'm living in a new place now, a small apartment in the city. It's not much, but it's mine, and for the first time in a long time, I've started to build a life that's truly my own. I've gotten back into old hobbies, things I used to love before everything got so complicated. I've started painting again, filling the walls of my apartment with bright splashes of color, something that makes the space feel alive, feel like home. I've even started dating again. It's not serious, at least not yet. Her name is Emily, and she's everything I never knew I needed: patient, kind, and understanding in a way that makes me feel safe. She knows about Natalie, I told her early on, not wanting there to be any secrets between us. She listened, really listened. And when I was finished, she simply took my hand in hers and told me she was sorry I'd been hurt like that. There were no empty promises, no grand declarations, just the simple reassurance that she was here, that she wanted to be with me. And that was enough. Natalie's shadow still lingers sometimes, especially in the quiet moments when I'm alone with my thoughts. But it's not as dark as it used to be. I no longer feel the sharp sting of betrayal when I think of her, no longer feel the anger that used to bubble up inside me. Instead, I just feel acceptance. She made her choices, and I made mine. We've both moved on, and I hope, truly hope, that she's found whatever it was she was looking for. Because I know now that I've found what I needed: myself. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I'm okay with that. I've learned that sometimes the beauty of life is in the not knowing, in the surprises that come when you least expect them. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what comes next.